Now, while politicians argue over the details of the Brexit deal, thousands of British residents say they're making their own plans to exit the UK. Several social media sites have sprung up offering help and advice to those hoping to leave before the deadline in March next year, or for those planning their future outside the UK.
Well, our social affairs correspondent Polly Evans has been speaking to some of those who are planning to go, including a Surrey couple who got engaged and married because of Brexit and have left for Portugal this week.
John and Karen Miller at the Gardens in Lingfield, where they celebrated their wedding this year. They run social dances at a venue in Surrey, but they've been in a race to buy a property in Portugal and secure residency before next March.
We just thought the country is going to be divided, it's going to take a long time for this to be sorted out, and it's pushed us into making the move after a lot of heart searching, because obviously we're leaving family behind. I have 2 sons, but you have to make your own life.
I'm quite nervous about the move. I'm excited as well. It's difficult. I've not lived abroad before, whereas John has. Obviously, I've still got my mum over here. She lives in Whitstable, but it really is not that far away. I want to continue to be European.
Ulrika Lucas, originally from Germany, and her husband Stanislav have lived in the UK for more than 30 years. They raised their 2 children in Edenbridge. She says she's devoted much of her working life to the NHS, but after Brexit, they no longer feel welcome.
If you stuck around and waited to see what happened after Brexit in this country, you might be pleasantly surprised. You might find that things look up for the UK and prospects here.
I'm certain it's a definite step backwards for this country. I think that the freedom of movement is going to be limited, and since the referendum, certain people all of a sudden feel they are entitled to say these things, negative things about people who weren't born here. And I still have to meet a European migrant who is not actually working and earning their living here. My answer would be that I do not trust anything that they're telling us at the moment.
Muriel Stenzel has already gone back to France after nearly a decade in Kent. She says after losing her job in Canterbury, she struggled to get work because local companies were uncertain about her right to stay here. And she says she suffered abuse.
Can you imagine, saying goodbye to almost 10 years of your life, and starting again from scratch in a country that you hardly know anymore, like France for me. And I had to leave behind my daughter and my granddaughter, who still live in Kent. So I became one of these scab families. We are scabbing most of the time, and I have to return, of course, every now and then in the UK, because I will be always torn between 2 countries.
These are 3 cases of thousands of people looking for help to leave via social media, concerned about what Brexit might mean for them. Polly Evans, BBC South East Today.
Well, we're joined now from Westminster by the MP for Faversham, Helen Whately, who's also Vice Chair of the Conservative Party. Thank you for joining us. How exactly should the Prime Minister's current withdrawal deal reassure anyone who we've just heard from who's very concerned about staying in the UK?
Well, I think the first thing I should say is I think it's really, really important as we go through this time of uncertainty that the message goes to people who are here from the EU that you are absolutely welcome in this country. We know that workers from the EU make a huge contribution to our economy and to our public services, particularly in sectors like healthcare and social care, but also in my constituency in fruit farming. So number one principle, it's totally unacceptable for EU migrants to be subject to abuse, and absolutely they are welcome.
People agree with you on that. My question was, how exactly will the Prime Minister's withdrawal deal go anyway to healing some of these divisions and reassuring people who want to leave the country?
Yeah, sorry, I was just coming to your question. The withdrawal agreement gives certainty for EU citizens in the UK and UK citizens in the EU on their rights. And the key part of that is that it's to be reciprocal, and to make clear that EU citizens who are here are able to continue to be here, and vice versa for UK citizens in the EU.
But as we just heard, that message doesn't seem to be getting through. Whatever's being discussed at Westminster, here in Kent and Sussex, employers aren't sure about prospective employees' status, and that's causing people like Muriel, to leave the country.
I agree, that's very worrying. I know, for instance, that I wrote to farmers who were asking me about the status for EU workers last year to give the clarity at the time that there was there. And it's a very good thing that you're covering this topic, for instance, this evening, because the message has to go out there that the EU withdrawal agreement would give that level of certainty and confidence to people.
Right, so the government's clearly not getting this right, is it, by not communicating that message clearly enough?
Well, there's clearly an enormous challenge with the communications, that there is a lot of noise and a lot of debate going on over all sorts of parts of the EU withdrawal agreement, particularly talk about things like the backstop on Northern Ireland. And that's probably crowding out the really, really important practical conversation which affects so many people's lives about the rights for people from the EU in the UK. And that's really important, that message should get out there.
Whatever happens in the next few months over Brexit, whatever side of the divide you're on, there are deep divisions in this country, clearly, and they go very deep with many individuals and affect their lives. How on earth does the government go about healing those divisions in the long run?
Well, what I would like to see happen over the weeks and months ahead is that we go forwards doing what the Prime Minister's advocating, which is to leave the European Union, to be true to the referendum result, to honour the referendum result and leave the European Union, but doing it in a way that protects people's jobs and livelihoods, particularly the fears of people who voted to remain and feel very strongly that their livelihoods depend on a close relationship with the European Union. We need an agreement that brings those two things together. That's what she's put on the table. That is why I'm supporting the proposed agreement.
OK, Helen Whately, thank you very much for joining us.